Welcome to another episode of the Protect the Dream Project. I am your host, Mark DeLeon. What have you been dreaming about? Is there something that you always wanted to do, but you really can't seem to get out of your own way to get it done? Well, today we're speaking with a gentleman who has quite a story. He's taken the road less traveled. But before we get into that, I said I want to welcome to the Protect Dream Project. Our objective here at Protect the Dream Project is to help you find the tools to move you from hilltop to hilltop, or when you are in that valley of life and you're trying to climb up the slope and you get halfway up and you slide back down, you ask yourself, well, what do I do now? So it's about talking about the practical stuff, looking at the tough stuff. It's about hopefully inspiring you to move on and move forward with your life. So today my guest is a man of many talents, Paul Trammell. I saw that other interview with corrected the name's pronunciation, so it's Paul Trammell. He's an accomplished sailor, a writer, a traveler, a teacher, but hasn't always been that way. So, Paul, welcome to Protect the Dream Project. Thank you for joining us. Where do we find you today? Are you on your boat? I think it's called the Windflower.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Yes, I am in Bocas del Toro, Panama, aboard Windflower. I arrived here about 3 weeks ago from the Bahamas.
So, Paul, you've lived a lot of lives. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of synopsis as to where you were and where you are?
Sure. Yeah, let's see. Well, how far back should we go? Well, I had a pretty typical upbringing. Well, I don't know if anything's typical, but a good upbringing. I had a good childhood. I went to college. I went to graduate school, studied biology, and then really didn't know what to do with myself after college. I taught school for a year and didn't like it. And then I decided that what I really wanted to do was to chase my dream of being a musician. And I moved to Florida. And for just over 20 years, I played guitar, electric guitar, in bands, reggae bands, original music, writing music, and really chasing the dream of being a rock star, a professional musician. I wanted to go all the way, and I pushed it hard and had a whole lot of fun doing that. But in the end, it was a pretty unhealthy lifestyle, and I got way into drinking and drugs, and that kind of took over after a while. And at some point, I realized that dream wasn't ever going to happen, and on top of that, I needed to sober up, or else my life was going to continue spiraling downhill. And so anyway, quit drinking, quit the drugs, and just through my own force of will, really, I kind of developed my own way of doing it. I'm not really a group therapy kind of person. I've been to AA, I've been to NA. In the past, I got a DUI a long time ago, so I actually was court ordered to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I respect them, and I think their program is great for a certain percentage of the population. But there's a large percentage of the population that does not want to go to meetings, does not want to go to AA or NA, doesn't want to give up their life to a higher power, or just go to group therapy. A lot of people just don't want to do it and aren't going to do it. And I'm one of those people. I don't think I'm very uncommon in that. And I've been sober for 8 years, so obviously what I did worked. And so anyway, I'm sober 8 years now. I've written a couple of books about it, and I also decided, and it was all kind of part of that I really wanted to change everything. That's one of the strategies of getting sober. When you really have a problem, when your life, people who have drinking and drug problems, their whole lives end up revolving around their habit, their drug habit, their drinking habit. I mean, alcohol is a drug. I could just be saying drugs this whole time, but we're all kind of programmed to say drugs and alcohol as if they're two different things, but they're not. Anyway, that's a whole different subject. People who have drug problems, lives end up completely revolving around their drug habits. And in order to get sober and stay sober, you need to change as much of your life as you can. And I changed everything. I sold my house, quit my job, got rid of everything I owned that didn't come on the boat, and I bought a sailboat, and I became a writer, and I sailed away, and I'm still away. It's been 4 years since I sold my house. Yeah, 4 years this summer.
So what was
and I've
that?
been living on my boat the whole time.
What was that process like? I mean, when you finally recognize that there's something holding you back from pursuing that dream, or rather, maybe it wasn't necessarily a point where you were pursuing the dream. Maybe you recognized something was destroying a dream. Like what was that for you? Was the addiction, if that's what you want to call it, something that kind of hit you in the face, and one day you said, "Oh my, this is not this is really killing me."
Yeah, a combination of I knew it was happening for a long time, and then there was kind of a trigger that started the whole thing. So, you know, I think in general, people who have drug problems know it. They know deep down inside that they shouldn't be that it's destructive. The problem is our bodies change and our minds change and our reward systems in our bodies change, and we don't get any kind of pleasure out of life without the drug once you're addicted. So even though you know that it's harmful, you also know you're going to be sick for a long time. You're going to be miserable immediately upon quitting, and nobody wants to do that. So it's easy to go through life knowing you have a problem and feeling powerless to do anything about it. And that's where I was for years. And then one day there was sort of a trigger, and that was I was at a party and I had a beer in my hand and had a cooler of beer at my feet, and I saw a friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, Jim," and he didn't have a beer in his hand, and so I said, "Would you like a beer?" And Jim, I remember Jim was well dressed. He looked clean cut. He looked happy. He was smiling. His hands were empty. And I offered him a beer, and he said, "No, I quit." And I said, "Holy cow, Jim, how did you do it? Why did you do it?" Because I was curious. I was legitimately curious. Like how do you pull that off? It seems like a magic trick. He said, "My brother died." Well, I kind of knew the saga of his brother. His brother was a drug addict as well, and he had been very sick. His internal organs were failing, uh, and he eventually died. He just died of sickness and malnutrition and internal organ failure. It's a common death for alcoholics or drug addicts. Your internal organs just start failing. Alcohol poisons every single cell in your body. It destroys methodically and slowly destroys every organ in your body, literally, including your brain. And he died, and he was younger than me. So I was 44 at the time. That guy was 40, and he's already dead. Not from one night of drinking too much, just a long, slow, painful, miserable death. And that hit me. And the next day, I was terribly hungover. I skipped work. I sat at home and watched Netflix or something, and just felt like a total loser. I ordered a pizza, like from Domino's or something, and I remember it just tasted like Play-Doh. I almost puked. So I just felt like the biggest loser in the world. And I said, "You know what? I've got 2 beers from last night in the fridge. I'm going to go ahead and drink them. And that's it. I'm never going to drink again. Like, this is it. It's going to happen." And I made it happen. I methodically made it happen. And that was 8 years ago, and I haven't had a beer since. I distinctly remember the last beer I drank. It was a Beck's, and I set it. And as I finished it, I set it down on the table. My friend John was there, and I said, "John, this is the last beer I'm ever going to drink." And it was.
Wow, that I think is fantastic willpower on your part. I mean, I'm not a drinker, but I know a number of people who have had challenges with that in their lives, and I know that just to walk away cold turkey like that is not an easy thing to do. So I commend you on
No.
that. And at this stage, I'm in my 50s. I'm afraid to say that. And this stage in your life, when you start seeing your friends leaving this world, it has quite a it does quite a number on your mind. For whatever reason happens, you start really thinking really hard about your own mortality, and what it is you want to accomplish the rest of your life. What have I done of worth, or where am I going? It really makes you stop and think about those things. So where did you start your dream chasing journey? I mean, right after you become sober, did you take stock and did you say, okay, look, I'm taking my life this direction? Like, how did you end up on a boat? You know, what is it that made that transition to?
Yeah. All right. So great question. I'll go back to my first year. I was coming up on my first year of sobriety. I've been saving money. One of my strategies to get sober. Um, and I've outlined them all in my book. The first book I wrote about this subject is called Alcoholics Not Anonymous. And one of my strategies was to put cash in a box, cash I would otherwise spend on beer and a cigar box. And I would pull it out and count it every now and then. And eventually I said, okay, I'm going to spend this on something cool at some point. So that cash is in a box. I'm still not sure what I'm going to spend it on. One of my other strategies is to do things that your drug habit would have prevented you from doing in the past. Some fun things you wanted to do but couldn't do. So I wanted to go on a long canoe trip, and I couldn't do that as the heavy beer drinker I was before, because I would have had to tow a second canoe behind me full of beer. You know, literally with like one cooler of beer in my canoe wouldn't have done it for 5 days. You know, I would have needed like a whole other canoe, like a tow truck. You know, so I booked this 5-day canoe trip through the Okefenokee Swamp, and it was wonderful. It was just total wilderness adventure. I was looking for big adventure, and I got it. And while I was out there, I had this flashback to when I was a kid on a sailboat in the ocean with my dad sailing to the Bahamas. And I remember the first time I looked around me and saw 360 degrees of ocean with no land in sight. It was a wonderful feeling, and I remembered it, and I thought to myself, that's it. It was like a light bulb moment. It was like, I need to be a sailor. I need more adventure in my life, because alcohol had been replacing adventure. I've always been an outgoing, adventurous outdoorsman, and the latter years of my life, I was just drinking heavily and partying hard, and that has sort of taken the place of like real adventure. So I spent the money in the cigar box on a sailing class, a 1-week sailing class, and from that point, I was just hooked. I just knew it. I knew this is it. I want to be a sailor. That's another thing I wanted to do, but knew I couldn't do as a heavy drinker. You know, you can live on a sailboat and never go anywhere and be a drunk, but if you want to go places, you can't. You can't be drunk when you're actually sailing offshore, especially by yourself. You can't drink at all. Um, you know, real sailors don't drink very much. They might drink when they get somewhere, but they don't drink when they're offshore. It just doesn't make any sense at all. You know, especially solo. I'm a solo sailor. You can't drink at all as a solo sailor. You got to be. There's, you know, I could go way into that, but that's a different podcast.
So I was in doing my research. I was watching some of your YouTube stuff on your trip to Newfoundland. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
And it caused me to think about solo sailing. You know, being alone for long periods of time, going from one side of the ocean to the other. How does that play on your mental health? I mean, like what runs through your mind other than, I guess, if it was me on your boat, it would be, gee, what am I doing out here? You know, because
yeah, you had that feeling a lot.
Like how does that play with your mind?
Oh, it does my mind great. I mean, solo sailing is absolutely not for everyone, but if you're the sort of person who enjoys the outdoors alone, the solitude, like, you can just ask yourself one simple question: do you feel loneliness or do you feel solitude when you're alone? Yes, particularly alone in the wilderness. Sitting alone at your house on a Friday night, no, we're all gonna feel lonely at that point. But when you're out in the woods by yourself, or the beach or anywhere in nature, do you feel that sense of solitude and, you know, appreciating the beauty and the wonder of nature and the peace and the quiet of being alone? If you appreciate that, then you might enjoy solo sailing. I do. I love it. Doesn't matter how many days at sea I am. I don't get lonely. I appreciate the solitude. I love it. Out in the ocean by yourself, and you look around and you think, I'm the only person here. I'm looking at a roughly 15-mile diameter circle of the earth, and I'm the only one on it. It's like my little patch of the earth right now. And then night falls, and sometimes you can see this, you know, stars like you've never seen before. Or sometimes the full moon lights up the whole scene. You can see all the ocean and the waves and everything from the moon. It's just glorious. You know, I love it.
So how does
it does my mental health well.
how does the solitude lead to helping you chase the dream that you're chasing? Or I should be asking, maybe I can't roll that back before you answer that. What is the dream that you are chasing, or are you in it?
Yeah, I am in the dream right now. Perpetuating this lifestyle is the dream, but I'm definitely in it. To live on a boat as a nomad, while making a living writing books, uh, while making a living in the arts at all, in whatever whichever art it happens to be. It used to be music. Before that, it was painting. Now it's writing. Uh, that's the dream. Make my living in the arts, sail, be a nomad, go to places I want to go, spearfish, surf, enjoy nature. Yeah, it's definitely happening. It's happening right now.
You're a fortunate man to be able to do that. There's a lot of people out there that have been chasing that dream, and I said earlier, it's not willing to, or not able to, or feeling they're not able to take that leap to
Hmm.
make that. Or I guess in your case, you had
Yeah.
more of a catalyst pushing you, realizing that you need to make some changes in your life. You said in your interview with Wayward Travel, you have to figure out what makes you happy which gives life meaning. How did you figure out that sailing is what was going to make you happy?
Yeah, that takes a lot of conscious thought, and it's not something you're gonna figure out in 10 minutes sitting down thinking about it. It's more like a lifetime process. What makes you happy? You really need to think about that on a regular basis and notice things in life that make you happy. Uh, you have to recognize that you're happy, and then ask yourself why. What is it about this moment that makes me happy? And I've thought about that a lot and analyzed my life and come up with some answers. One of them is nature. I've always felt cut off from nature, living in a house, in a community, driving a car, working in an office. I haven't had too many office jobs, but a couple. And those things don't make me happy. What makes me happy is being outside, exposed to nature, uh, doing fun sports, being creative. Those are so. I've tried to maximize my life. I've tried to maximize those things in my life, and and then you gotta just design. You gotta start designing a life. And it's all hypothetical at first, but you have to literally design a life that's going to make you happy, and then you have to start taking baby steps in that direction. You can't just wave a magic wand and all of a sudden you're living the life you designed. You have to take one tiny, tiny little step at a time. I love that phrase, baby steps. That comes from the movie What About Bob? I don't remember. Bill Murray, I think, was the character in it. Anyway, he was afraid to even go outside his house, and the guy who was trying to help him was saying, "Baby steps, just baby steps. First look out the window, then touch the doorknob, and then twist the doorknob, and then tomorrow we're gonna crack the door a little bit, and 2 weeks later, he's like stepping out onto the porch. He's taking baby steps in that direction. That's what you got to do when you design a life that you want to lead. You have to think about it a lot. You have to think about the obstacles and how you're going to get past them. For me, like for all of us out here on the water, we're all trying to make a living out here doing it. Some people are retired and just have money, and that's easier. But most of us are trying to make a living somehow. Getting rid of all the stuff you have on land, that's tough. I sold a house that I'll probably never be able to afford to replace. So it's a one-way ticket. There's no going back for me, unless all of a sudden I start making millions, with my books. Because the house I sold like tripled or quadrupled in value in the time in the 4 years ago that I sold it. There's no buying that house again for me. So like I said, it's a one-way ticket. It's scary. You got to just. I'm a risk taker too. I'm okay with risk. I enjoy it. I enjoy change. As long as the benefits outweigh justify the risk, I'm okay with it. And
I once heard a.
there's,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, there's this lifestyle to me is worth everything, even if it's only 5 or 6 years long. And it comes to a crashing, destructive end. It's still worth it.
I
It's worth
once
it to
heard.
me.
I once heard a comment about and I don't know if how true this is, but it was I guess an anecdotal comment about the Vikings when they left somewhere to go to war, they burned the boats behind them, right? So
Oh yeah,
there was only one way forward, and
yeah,
going back was not an option. It was success or death, right? So
yeah,
I think it's a very good metaphor for people, um, if you're looking to chase that dream. You know, sometimes having a plan B is not always a good thing, right? So if it's
yeah,
plan A, it's plan A all the way, right? So can you tell us a little
yep.
bit more about your book? I really I know I haven't read it, but I really love the title, Chasing the Nomadic Dream.
Oh yeah, Chasing the Mag Dream is the the I think the fourth book I wrote overall, and the third sailing nonfiction, and it is all about what we're talking about right now. How do you pull the trigger, or how did I pull the trigger? How did I do it? How did I make it happen? Selling your house, getting rid of all your stuff, not having a plan B. I didn't want to have a rental house on shore to worry about and think about while I was out here. Uh, I didn't want to have something pulling me back um, to shore, and that's not the right decision for everyone, but it was for me. But yeah, the book was starts off going through that process, then goes into buying this boat that I'm on right now, and getting and fixing it up and getting it ready for offshore, and the adventure of I was still fairly novice sailor at the time too. I'd done some offshore passages, but wasn't a great sailor yet. I wasn't not that I'm a great sailor now either, but I'm always learning. But anyway, I bought the boat in Massachusetts in October, and being from Florida, there's a big fear there of being cold, because you got to get out of there, because it's already basically winter by my standards, and winters get nasty in the North Atlantic Ocean. They get really nasty, dangerous. So anyway, I got out of there and got to Virginia, worked on the boat some more, and got out of there in December when it was freezing cold, and made my way to the Bahamas. I arrived in the Bahamas with a whole bunch of things on the boat not working, like the alternator didn't work, and a lot of the navigation lights didn't work, and a whole bunch of stuff. Big list of things to fix, but I made it. I didn't turn back. I almost turned back because literally the alternator wasn't working. Like that's pretty crucial. You need that to charge your batteries. I had solar panels, but anyway, it's a long story. But they weren't doing the job on the way down. So anyway, I didn't turn back. It was bust or get to the Bahamas, and I got there and had a wonderful season in Bahamas that that also was the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So I was in the Bahamas during the lockdown in America. So I got to skip that, thank goodness. Uh, yeah. So and then eventually the lockdown started coming to an end, and I figured, okay, this would be a good time for me to work on the boat again. So I sailed back to Florida and spent that summer and fall with the boat hauled out on the hard, working on it all day, every day. Yeah, but that book is all about chasing the dream, exactly that, designing the dream, figuring out how you're going to do it, and pulling the trigger and making it happen.
So what fears did you face when you were pulling the trigger, and when you get on your boat to make a crossing, there's got to be a certain amount of fear that you work with, um I guess maybe to keep you on track, or to you know what fears do you deal with on a regular basis that keep you driving forward in your dream?
Well, let's see. I mean, the original biggest fear was selling the house. Um, you got a certain amount of stability in your life when you own a house, and I knew I was going to lose that. Um, and of course I did. That was probably the biggest fear. Like I knew I would likely never be able to afford to replace it. Um, and it's still scary knowing that I have no plan B. I mean, I do have a plan B, but it doesn't involve living in a house. It involves being a carpenter, living in a boat at a marina in Florida. Um, which isn't horrible, but it's not a great plan B. But like you said, plan B doesn't always help. If you're going to be an artist, if you're going to chase the dream of being an artist, it's almost, you have a better chance of success if you do not have a good plan B, because you don't want to have something that's tempting you to quit. You got to you got to think to yourself, I'm going to starve and die if I don't start producing good art that sells. So, biggest fear was the house. As far as sailing fears, I don't really have much anymore. Of course, in the beginning, when I bought my first boat and did my first offshore passage, I was afraid the boat was simply going to break apart and sink. Like I started thinking to myself, what do I know? How do I know this boat that was built in 1972? How do I know it's not just going to crack right in half? I don't know. What if the mast could just fall in the water? The keel could fall off. I could hit a sunken object, like people run into things in the ocean all the time. Shipping containers, they fall off. Cargo ships, they hover right beneath the surface or right at the surface, and you run into them, and boats just sink immediately. That happens on a fairly regular basis. I mean, not common enough that we're all scared of it, but it does happen. So I started, I had some fears like that. Um, I don't really fear death. I fear falling overboard and having a long, slow death. So I stay attached to the boat. I wear a harness that has tethers on it with carabiners on them and various things throughout the boat to stay clipped to. So I'm always attached to my boat, and I wear a PLB, which is a satellite-based SOS device. I wear that on my life jacket. So if I do fall overboard, I'll at least be floating in the life jacket, and I'll have a light, and I'll have a PLB, and there'll be some chance I'll get rescued. But I typically stay attached to the boat, because the really scary thing is to fall overboard and watch your boat sail away from you while you're treading water, or you're bobbing around in a life jacket. If the water's cold up in Canada, you're going to be dead. Within an hour or two, or a couple hours, or I don't know, sometime. But down here in the tropics, you're just going to be bobbing around until you die of dehydration, or a shark eats you or something. Like that's a bad death. So I fear a bad death, but I don't fear death in general. I almost drowned a few years ago. I mean, I kind of did. I passed out underwater when I was freediving, and I woke up on the surface all disoriented and blind, like literally blind. And that was a very near death experience, and it kind of took away my fear of dying in general.
And you were by yourself at
So
that time?
yeah, I was in the Bahamas, and I wrote about this in my book, Journey to the Ragged Islands. But I was in the Bahamas, and I was writing a book, my second sailing book, and I wanted adventure. I wanted the book to have like legit adventure. So one of the things I wanted to do was to free dive in blue holes. Blue holes are like sinkholes in the ocean floor. They're basically vertical shafts, vertical caves that go straight down into the depths of the earth. And so I found one, anchored near it, and was diving in it. I was having a great time. It was adventure, all right. It was like 80 feet deep, and there's a cave at the bottom that led into the darkness of the earth. And on the fourth dive, coming back up about 15 feet from the surface, I just basically fell asleep. I remember it happening. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm falling asleep. This is like, I remember saying, hang on there, Paul, hang in there, hang in there. And then bam, I was out. I was dreaming. I had a dream. I still remember the dream too. And then I woke up on the surface coughing, and I couldn't see, didn't know where I was, had no idea what was going on. And then I realized I was in the water, and then I saw my boat, and I thought I'd fallen overboard. And then it all kind of came to me, like passed out freediving.
Was that
terrifying at that point? But
was that a lack of oxygen, or was it a pressure situation? Like that's pretty bizarre.
yeah, it's called it happens to freedivers fairly commonly. That's why you're not supposed to freedive by yourself. It's called a shallow water blackout. It yeah, it happens from lack of oxygen, just from holding your breath too long. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's essentially what happens. You don't have enough oxygen. Your body starts shutting down non-essential systems like your consciousness, and hoping that you'll start breathing at some point. And that's what happened. Luckily, I was close enough to the surface that I was buoyant, and I floated to the surface, and somehow I started coughing. I mean, I don't know how. Like, I very easily could have not survived that one. It was a big stroke of luck. And you know what? I don't think it was luck. I mean, the dream I had was a side view of myself, like I was looking at myself from the side, profile view of me talking to somebody, and the person I was talking to was off screen. I couldn't see them, and I wasn't talking. They were talking to me, and I was nodding my head like this, like uh-huh, mm-hmm. So what does that mean? You know, uh, to me that means I went to the other side for a minute. Somebody on the other side was giving me some information and then sent me back. So it wasn't necessarily luck. It was just wasn't my time to go. And so one of the take home messages for me from that was I'm not going to die until it's my turn to die, until it's my time.
I
So
I, I
then
think
there's
that
nothing to fear.
no, there is no fear in death as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think we all have a purpose to fulfill, and when our purpose, this is just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
When we have fulfilled that purpose, then our time comes not shortly after that. So
Yep.
I think for a lot of people who have passed, uh, while it's tragic in many cases, and maybe unforeseen, their purpose has been fulfilled, or their passing is part of that purpose. You see what I'm saying? Right. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that's just a
Yeah.
personal philosophical rant on my part.
No, I think
but
you're right. I think
so
you're right. I think I had more work to do. I think whoever was talking to me was making that clear to me, and was probably also saying, "Hey, you need to be more careful. Like we can't be rescuing like you like this all the
yeah.
time. You know, you need to be a little less of a risk taker here. A little more responsible. Uh,
So
but your work isn't done.
so a little while back, I had a friend of mine. This is an old friend of mine. She said to me, my dad always thought you were quite a dreamer. And I thought about that. I said, initially I took it as what's she getting at, But when I thought about it, I said, there's nothing wrong with being a dreamer. Dreamers are the people who change the world, right? Who tend to make things out of nothing. So I kind of at that point took it as a stamp of approval, I guess, his part, But what keeps you being a dreamer, Paul?
Oh gosh, it's just the way I'm programmed. Um, I think I've always been a dreamer. I've always been one to chase dreams, to take risks, uh, to do the thing I want to do, to live life now. Like one of the philosophies I've always had is not to wait to live your life, but to do it now, to do the things you want to do while you still can. Um, we all have that question we have to deal with. Do I want to? I mean, for me, it was: do I want to take the career path that I always thought I was going to take? See, my father was a surgeon, and I always thought that I would be a surgeon. That's what I thought I was going to do when I went to college. And at some point, pretty quickly actually in college, I realized like I'm not the same as these pre-med students. I'm just not one of them. I want to go surfing. You know, they're not going surfing. They don't have time. They don't have time for anything. And then I thought, geez, my dad doesn't have time for anything either. He works. He just works all the time. He gets to play golf once in a while, but he's got to carry I mean, back then it was a beeper, and then it became like this phone that was like in a briefcase. Because it was the whole briefcase was the phone, uh, he had to take those things with him on the golf course, because he's getting called. He's going to be getting called while he's out there, and he's going to have to he's going to have to tell somebody what to do. Somebody's dying on the operating table. He's either going to have to give him some information, or he's going to have to get in his car and hurry up to the hospital in the middle of the night, all the time. Middle of the night, dad's gone. He's up and out of there. He's getting a call in the middle of the night, and somebody's dying. He's got to go. There's a surgery underway at the hospital that's going bad, and he's got to get in there and just go right to work. And that was his life, and he loved it. He enjoyed it, but that wasn't me. I wanted to. I want to live my life now. I want to. I want to surf while I'm young. I want to free dive and spearfish and sail and go on great adventures. And if it all leads to my destruction, then so be it, because that's the life I want to live. And I'm 52, so it hasn't killed me yet, hasn't destroyed me. And I'm, it's working. That's the answer to your question. What keeps me dreaming? It's working. Here I am on a boat. It's my fourth year on this boat, living full time on it. And the fourth year is coming to an end. It's going to be 5 years in October. I mean, the fifth year will start in October, so 4 years will be completed. And it's been the best 4 years of my life. And it's been so good and so much fun that it justifies any price. So that's what keeps me going. Chasing the dream works and produces results.
And one of the things that I try to encourage in my kids is about it's not necessarily about the money. While money is important, in order to allow you to live, it's about life experience, right?
Mhm.
Having experiences helps you grow, helps you mature. My girls, they're in their 20s, and they're just now starting to flourish and move out in the world. And getting those life experiences help you to become a better you. And you can't do that necessarily if you're always stuck behind a desk, right? Or pushing paper. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. There are people who are set up for that. That's the way they want to operate, and that works well for them. But I think for someone like me, I'm always looking for I wouldn't say the next great adventure, but the next challenge, I think is a better word for me, right? Whether it's from a work point of view or from a activity point of view, the challenges are always interesting. Like, for example, starting this podcast for me was something I said, hey, that's a really good idea. Let me throw my feet in there and see what becomes of it. It's been fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I meet great people like Paul doing this podcast, but the dream is always here. It's always right in front of you. It's like it's the carrot, right? The dream is to have that lifestyle that you're looking for, that allows you the flexibility to, like you're doing, Paul. Maybe not on a boat for me. I'm not too much of a sea guy, but I enjoy boats. But having that carrot in front of you for that lifestyle, I guess, that lifestyle choice that you want to make, or that freedom that you might be looking for, the feeling of freedom, is something that keeps moving and keeps you keep chasing it and following it. So I commend you. I commend you for your tenacity in what you're doing, and for helping others to see their best life as well too. So Paul, thank you for joining me. Actually, before we go, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your trip to Newfoundland.
Oh
Our
yeah. Oh, how
furthest east,
fantastic.
province. They've got some. I have personally not been that far east in Canada. I'm ashamed to say, after all these years. I have a lot of friends who come from Newfoundland, however, and they continually tell me about the beauty of Newfoundland, or as we like to call it here in Canada, the Rock. Right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your trip to the fjords in Newfoundland.
Oh, absolutely. That was a big dream I had before I bought this boat, was to go there. And it all started, I wanted to do this around the world sailing race, the Golden Globe race. In fact, I interviewed a guy from Toronto, Gaurav Shinde, who was entered in the race. He couldn't do it because he dislocated his shoulder. But anyway, I wanted to do that race. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, what if I spent the same amount of time and money on something else? Could I think of anything better to do? Which is a great question to ask whenever you have a big decision to make. If I spent the same amount of time and money on something else, could I do something better? I started looking at Google Earth. Where would I go in my boat if I didn't sail around the world and didn't stop anywhere? In the race, and I started looking up the U.S. coast, I was looking for places where wilderness met the ocean, real wilderness without houses and roads. There's nothing in the U.S. First off, like there's little spots, but there's no like large areas like that. Um, and then I kept going north, and Nova Scotia came next, and it was close. It was closer. It's got a bit more wilderness. There's an area called the 100 Wild Islands. That's more closer to what I was looking for, but still not it. And I kept going north, and the next thing was Newfoundland, which I'd heard that word, Newfoundland, but I didn't really know what it was. I didn't even know it was an island, really. I mean, I knew nothing about it whatsoever, but I saw immediately that it had what I was looking for. It has wilderness, real big, big, big wilderness, meeting the ocean with anchorages and no houses and no roads. That's what I wanted to see. And let me tell you what that is, what I got. I mean, it was fantastic. It was spectacular, dramatic wilderness, deep fjords, 1,000-foot cliffs on both sides of you, anchorages with cliffs and waterfalls and green mountains and slopes and tundra and moose and caribou and bald eagles and good fishing and seals and otters. Just absolutely spectacular. Talk about solitude and the beauty and grandeur of the wilderness. Well, you get it in Newfoundland. You get it big time. And I wrote a book about that called Sailing to Newfoundland. That's my latest book. Yeah, it exceeded my expectations in every way.
I will have to make a trip. I'm embarrassed to say I'm a Canadian who has not been to Newfoundland. So
yeah, no, I think that's common. I mean, it's there's a lot of places in America I haven't been. I've never been to the Grand Canyon, for instance. Canada's a big country, same as America. But yeah, if you like the wilderness, go. You can go to Francois. It's an outport in the fjords of the South Coast, and you're in a fjord there. You can hike up into the mountains right there from town. It's a tiny little town. There's probably like 200 people that live there, if that, maybe 100. It's a tiny little town at the foot of a huge cliff at the back of a fjord, surrounded by uninhabited fjords. No roads, boat access only. You can hike. You can get it. The locals will take you out on boats to the nearby fjords. Yeah, that would be one option. In fact, I met a family from like Idaho or something in Francois. That's what they were doing, just doing something completely different.
So, Paul,
yeah,
where can people find your books? And I know you're on YouTube. I know you're on YouTube. If you may give us a quick plug for your YouTube channel and some of your writings.
Yeah, I mean, you can find everything at paultrammell.com. You can look up Paul Trammell on Amazon and find my Amazon page and all my books. But everything's at paultrammell.com, paultrammell.com. You can find my I've published 9 books. I've got a podcast as well called Offshore Sailing and Cruising. You can find all that and more on my website.
And my last question to you is, what advice do you have for those who are afraid to jump off the cliff and chase their dream?
Oh, design and baby steps. If you've got a dream and you want to chase it, but you don't know how, you simply need to start designing a life that fits, that makes that happen, and then start taking baby steps in that direction on a regular basis. Think about it every day. What little baby step can I take today that's going to lead me in this direction? And that baby step might be simply thinking about it, because you haven't even started yet. But if sitting down and thinking about it for 10 minutes is your first baby step, then do it. And then tomorrow there might be something more concrete that's a baby step. And then eventually it's going to it's just going to be obvious that today is the day you pull the trigger, because you've been taking steps in that direction for so long that it's going to happen. Yeah, design and baby steps.
Excellent.
Get out there and chase your dream.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Protect the Dream project. We hope that at some point we'll connect with you again. What's your next trip after you've done the fjord? So where are we heading next?
I'm going to spend hurricane season here in Panama. I will likely go to the Bahamas next. but there is a big adventure that won't leave me alone, and that is the fjords of Chile, in Patagonia. Down there, the Beagle Channel and Straits of Magellan. There's a whole world of massive adventure down there that's just waiting for me.
Awesome.
So that might be the next big one.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you again, Paul, for joining us. We will speak with you another day.
Okay, bye.